London, 1815. Zara Dawson had precisely 1 hour before the Countess of Fairfax would ring for her morning tea, and she intended to make the most of it. The servants' staircase creaked beneath her worn slippers as she descended into the kitchens of Fairfax House, the most sought-after address in Mayfair during the London season. Clutched to her chest was her most prized possession, a dog-eared copy of Pride and Prejudice, published just 2 years prior. Reading again, are we? Mrs. Baxter, the cook, glanced up from the bread dough she was punishing with unnecessary vigor. That fancy education of yours won't fill your belly when the Countess discovers you neglecting your duties. Zara slipped the book into the pocket of her apron. The Countess is still abed, and her tea tray is prepared. I've time enough. Time enough to dream of gentlemen who don't exist, muttered Mrs. Baxter, but there was affection in her weathered face. It was true that Zara was not like the other maids. The daughter of a country vicar, she had been raised with an education befitting a gentleman's daughter. But when her father died of consumption 3 years ago, leaving nothing but debts and books, she had been forced to enter service. The Countess had hired her as a lady's maid precisely because of her refined speech and knowledge of literature, the better to read aloud to her mistress during migraines. Have you heard? Jenny, the scullery maid, appeared with a bucket of coal. There's to be a royal ball at Carlton House. His Majesty has recovered enough from his madness to make an appearance, and the Prince Regent is inviting half of London. And we'll be pressing gowns until our fingers bleed, Zara replied pragmatically, though she could not suppress a flash of curiosity. The Countess will require her best silks. Lady Catherine Eversley has commissioned 3 new gowns, Jenny continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially. And they say Lord Ashton Ellison has returned from the continent. Zara's fingers twitched involuntarily at the name. Lord Ashton, heir to the Dukedom of Westmoreland and the most eligible bachelor in England, had been abroad for 2 years. The gossip sheets had followed his exploits through Paris, Venice, and Vienna, each report more scandalous than the last. Before his departure, he had been the most sought-after gentleman in London, with a smile that could charm the paint from a wall and a fortune that could rebuild the wall entirely. What concern is Lord Ashton to us? Zara asked, busying herself with the teapot to hide the flush in her cheeks. Before Jenny could answer, a bell jangled imperiously from above stairs. The Countess was awake. No concern at all, Zara murmured to herself as she arranged the tea service. No concern whatsoever. *****. Lord Ashton Ellison stared at the gilt-edged invitation on his desk with the wariness of a man regarding a coiled serpent. The Prince Regent seal gleamed in the morning light that filtered through the windows of his Grosvenor Square townhouse. I suppose there's no escaping it, he said to his valet, Morris, who was laying out his shaving implements. Indeed not, my lord, Morris replied. Your father the Duke has already sent 3 messages inquiring about your attendance. Ashton sighed. 2 years away from England had not been sufficient to escape his father's matrimonial schemes. The Duke of Westmoreland had made it abundantly clear, this season, Ashton would choose a bride of suitable lineage, or the Duke would choose for him. And what delightful debutantes await me this year, Morris? More simpering misses with accomplishments in watercolors and the pianoforte. I couldn't say, my lord. Though there is considerable talk of Lady Catherine Eversley. Her dowry is substantial, and she is said to be quite beautiful. Ashton had met Lady Catherine before his departure for the continent. She had been pretty enough, he supposed, but with the personality of a particularly dull teacup. Still, a man in his position couldn't marry for something as frivolous as affection. That was a luxury reserved for second sons and merchants. As Morris applied the razor to his jaw with practiced precision, Ashton considered the upcoming ball. The Prince Regent's entertainments were notorious for their excess, champagne flowing like water, tables groaning with delicacies, and every eligible young lady in London on display like prize cattle at market. Perhaps I should develop a sudden case of gout, he mused. Your father would drag you to Carlton House by your cravat, gout notwithstanding, Morris replied evenly. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I live for your discomfort, my lord. Ashton's lips twitched. Morris had been with him since boyhood and was one of the few people with whom he could be entirely himself. Very well. Order my new evening clothes from Weston. If I must be sacrificed on the altar of matrimony, I shall at least be well dressed for the occasion. *****. The Countess of Fairfax's dressing room was a temple to vanity. Crystal flacons of French perfumes crowded the dressing table, while silks and satin spilled from wardrobes like exotic flowers. "Zara, you simply must do something with my hair. Lady Westmoreland will be at the ball, and that woman's turbans grow more elaborate with each passing year." The Countess peered at her reflection critically. Though past 40, she retained the beauty that had made her a celebrated toast in her youth. "Perhaps the pearl combs, my lady?" Zara suggested, lifting a strand of the Countess's still dark hair. "They would complement your ivory gown." "Yes, excellent. And remind me to wear the emerald necklace the Count gave me for our anniversary. I want to ensure Lady Catherine Eversley knows her place. The girl has been flaunting her youth as though it were an accomplishment rather than an accident of birth." Zara nodded, knowing better than to comment on the Countess's rivalries. As she arranged the lady's hair, pinning and curling with deft fingers, she allowed herself a moment of fancy. What would it be like to attend a royal ball? To wear silk instead of serviceable cotton, to dance instead of waiting in antechambers, to be seen as a lady rather than a shadow? "You're wool-gathering again," the Countess observed, meeting Zara's eyes in the mirror. "What occupies your thoughts so thoroughly?" "I was considering which jewels would best accentuate your gown, my lady." The Countess snorted delicately. "You were imagining yourself at the ball." "Don't deny it, I recognize that faraway look. I had it myself once, before I married the Count." Zara flushed, caught in her daydream. To her surprise, the Countess's expression softened. "You're an unusual girl, Zara. Too educated for service, too poor for society. In another life, you might have been a governess, or even a gentleman's wife. I am content with my position, my lady. Are you?" The Countess turned, studying Zara's face. "I was not much older than you when I made my debut. The season was different then, less mercenary, more romantic. Or perhaps I was simply more naive." She touched the pearl comb in her hair. "The Count courted me for 3 months before proposing. His letters were full of poetry. Now he speaks to me primarily about the estate accounts and his gout." Zara remained silent, unsure how to respond to this unprecedented confidence. The Countess seemed to shake herself from her reverie. "Well, that's quite enough sentimentality. I shall need the blue silk fan for tonight, and my dancing slippers must be inspected for scuffs." As Zara moved to the wardrobe, the Countess added, almost casually, "Lord Ashton Ellison has returned from the continent. They say he's even more handsome than before, though just as arrogant. Every mother with a marriageable daughter will be hunting him at the ball." Something in the Countess's tone made Zara glance up sharply. There was a speculative gleam in the older woman's eye that made her uneasy. "I'm sure Lord Ashton will find a suitable match among the season's debutantes," Zara replied neutrally. "Oh, undoubtedly. Though men of his station often find themselves bored by suitable matches." The Countess smiled enigmatically. "Bring me my correspondence case. I must write to Lady Westmoreland before the ball." The night of the royal ball arrived with a flurry of activity in Fairfax House. Zara had spent the day pressing the Countess's gown, polishing her jewels, and preparing hair pomade scented with jasmine. Now, as the Countess descended to her waiting carriage, resplendent in ivory silk and emeralds, Zara felt a familiar pang of wistfulness. "You've outdone yourself," the Countess said, surveying her appearance in the hallway mirror. "I look positively regal." "Indeed, my lady. You'll be the envy of Carlton House." The Countess hesitated, then reached into her reticule and withdrew a sealed letter. "This arrived for you this afternoon. Most irregular, I don't recall you receiving correspondence before." Zara accepted the letter with confusion. The paper was fine vellum, the seal unfamiliar. "Thank you, my lady. I can't imagine who would be writing to me. Open it after I've gone." And Zara, the Countess paused at the door. Sometimes fortune favors the bold. With that cryptic remark, she swept out to her carriage, leaving Zara staring at the mysterious letter. Once alone, Zara broke the seal with trembling fingers. Miss Dawson, your presence is required at Carlton House this evening at precisely 9 o'clock. Enter through the servants' entrance and present this letter. You will be met and provided with further instructions. This matter is of the utmost discretion and importance to her ladyship. Regards *. Mrs. Helena Winters *. Ladies companion to the Duchess of Westmoreland *. Zara read the letter 3 times, her confusion mounting. The Duchess of Westmoreland? Lord Ashton's mother? What possible business could such a grand lady have with a maid? She checked the clock, 8 o'clock. If she were to obey this summons, she would need to leave immediately. Common sense urged caution, this could be a prank or something worse. And yet, curiosity burned within her like a fever. Sometimes fortune favors the bold, the Countess had said. Was this what she had meant? Did she know about this mysterious summons? Before she could reconsider, Zara was racing to her small attic room, changing her cap for her single good bonnet, and wrapping herself in her woolen cloak. Whatever awaited her at Carlton House, she would face it with the dignity her father had instilled in her, even if her hands trembled and her heart raced like a runaway carriage. Carlton House blazed with light, its windows gleaming like jewels against the night sky. Carriages lined the circular drive, disgorging the cream of London society in a parade of silks, satins, and jewels. Zara, however, approached from the rear, where servants and tradespeople entered the Prince Regent's palace. She presented her letter to a livery-clad footman, who examined it with raised eyebrows before ushering her inside. "This way, miss," he said, leading her through a maze of corridors humming with the activity of dozens of servants preparing for the royal entertainment. The distant strains of an orchestra floated through the air, along with the murmur of aristocratic voices. The footman delivered her to a small antechamber where an elderly lady sat straight-backed in a chair, her silver hair arranged beneath a modest cap. She wore the sombre dress of a companion rather than a servant, and her shrewd eyes assessed Zara immediately. "Miss Dawson, I presume. I am Mrs. Winters." She rose with the aid of a cane. "You are punctual, which is promising. Do you know why you have been summoned?" "No, madam. The letter mentioned only that my presence was required." "Indeed." Mrs. Winters circled Zara slowly, examining her from head to toe. "You have the look of your mother about you. The same eyes." Zara stiffened. "You knew my mother?" "I knew of her. The Duchess was acquainted with your father before his unfortunate marriage to a music teacher's daughter." The casual disdain in the woman's voice made Zara's cheeks burn. "My mother was a lady in every sense that matters." Mrs. Winters's expression remained impassive. "Your loyalty is commendable, if misplaced. However, we are not here to discuss your parentage." She moved to a side door and opened it, revealing a room where a magnificent gown of deep blue silk lay displayed on a chaise longue. Beside it were slippers, gloves, and a small jewelry case. "What is this?" Zara asked, bewildered. "This, Miss Dawson, is your transformation. The Duchess of Westmoreland requires your assistance in a matter of some delicacy. You are to attend the ball tonight, not as a servant, but as Lady Zara Darlington, a distant cousin of the Duchess recently arrived from Northumberland." Zara's mouth fell open in a most unladylike manner. That's absurd. I cannot pretend to be a lady of quality. I would be discovered immediately. You were raised as a gentleman's daughter, were you not? You can read and write, dance and play the pianoforte. Your speech is refined, and your manners, while rusty, can be polished for one evening. But why? What possible reason could the Duchess have for such a masquerade? Mrs. Winters's thin lips curved in what might generously be called a smile. The Duchess has her reasons, which will be explained in due course. For now, you need only know that your cooperation will be generously rewarded. Sufficient funds, perhaps, to establish yourself as a governess or companion, rather than spending your life as a lady's maid. Independence. Freedom from service. It was a temptation greater than Zara could have imagined. Still, suspicion lingered. And if I refuse? Then you return to Fairfax House, and no one need ever know of this encounter. Mrs. Winters checked a small watch pinned to her bodice. You have precisely 2 minutes to decide. The Duchess awaits your answer. Zara looked again at the gown, the most beautiful garment she had ever seen, and thought of the Countess's parting words. Sometimes fortune favors the bold. I accept, she said, hardly recognizing her own voice. Mrs. Winters nodded briskly. Excellent. Now, we must make haste. The ball is already underway, and your entrance must be timed precisely. Within a quarter hour, Zara stood before a mirror, transformed. The blue silk gown hugged her figure before flaring into a graceful skirt, its neckline modest yet flattering. Her dark hair had been arranged by a silent lady's maid who appeared and disappeared like a ghost, leaving Zara's chestnut locks twisted into an elegant coiffure adorned with a single sapphire pin. A matching necklace graced her throat, paste jewels, surely, but convincing to all but the most discerning eye. Remember, Mrs. Winters instructed, you are Lady Zara Darlington. Your father was a baronet who died last winter, leaving you in the care of your cousin, the Duchess. You have spent most of your life in Northumberland and are unfamiliar with London society. This will excuse any small errors in etiquette. And what am I to do at the ball? You will dance, converse, and observe. Nothing more, nothing less. The Duchess will make your introduction to selected guests. Follow her lead in all things. Mrs. Winters adjusted a curl at Zara's temple. One final thing, under no circumstances are you to reveal your true identity to anyone, particularly not to Lord Ashton Ellison. Before Zara could question this specific prohibition, a door opened, revealing a regal woman in her 50s, attired in burgundy silk and diamonds that glittered like stars in the candlelight. Your Grace, Mrs. Winters curtsied deeply. May I present Lady Zara Darlington? The Duchess of Westmoreland surveyed Zara with calculating eyes so similar to her son's that Zara nearly gasped. Yes, she will do nicely. The resemblance is there, though subtle enough not to raise immediate questions. She addressed Zara directly. You understand the conditions of our arrangement. I am to attend the ball as your cousin, dance, converse, and observe, Zara replied, her voice steadier than she felt. I am not to reveal my identity to anyone, especially not to Lord Ashton. Precisely. The Duchess offered a thin smile. You appear intelligent, which is a refreshing quality in a young woman. Most of the débutantes my son encounters can scarcely string together a coherent thought beyond fashion and the weather. If I may ask, Your Grace, what is the purpose of this charade? The Duchess's eyes glittered. Let us simply say that I am conducting an experiment in character. Now, we must join the ball. Remember, you are my protégé, and I have high expectations. With that, the Duchess swept from the room, clearly expecting Zara to follow. As she did, heart pounding beneath the fine silk of her borrowed gown, Zara could not shake the feeling that she was stepping not just into a ballroom, but into a carefully laid trap. The only question was, who was the intended prey? The Prince Regent's ballroom was a blaze of crystal, gold, and candlelight. Hundreds of London's elite swirled across the polished floor in a kaleidoscope of colour and movement, while an orchestra played a stately waltz from a raised dais. The air was heavy with perfume, beeswax, and the indefinable scent of wealth. Zara followed the Duchess through the crowd, acutely aware of curious glances and whispered comments. The Duchess acknowledged acquaintances with regal nods but did not pause until they reached a small group near one of the enormous windows overlooking the gardens. Westmoreland, a portly gentleman in an immaculate coat, greeted the Duchess. We had begun to think you would not grace us with your presence. Lord Fairchild. The Duchess inclined her head. I was delayed by family matters. May I present my young cousin, Lady Zara Darlington, recently arrived from Northumberland. Zara curtsied as she had been taught in her youth, keeping her eyes modestly lowered. A pleasure, my dear, Lord Fairchild said, his gaze assessing. Northumberland, you say? You must know the Percys, then. Only by reputation, my lord, Zara replied, grateful for her education. My father's estate was quite remote. Lady Zara has led a sheltered life, the Duchess interjected smoothly. This is her first season in London. Then you must allow me to introduce you to my daughter, Amelia. Lord Fairchild gestured to a pretty blonde girl nearby. She made her debut last year and knows all the right people. The introductions continued, each more daunting than the last. Zara committed names to memory: Lord and Lady Harrington, the Honourable Miss Penelope Foster, Sir William Grant, while striving to maintain the facade of a well-bred young lady new to society. The Duchess remained at her side, a formidable guardian whose presence both protected and terrified her. It was during a brief lull in the conversation that Zara first glimpsed Lord Ashton. He stood across the ballroom, surrounded by admiring ladies, his tall figure unmistakable even at a distance. His evening clothes were impeccably tailored, emphasizing broad shoulders and a narrow waist. His dark hair was styled in the fashionable Brutus crop, and even from afar, his bearing spoke of privilege and confidence. As though sensing her regard, he glanced in their direction. Zara quickly averted her eyes, her pulse quickening. "Ah, there is my son," the Duchess murmured, a note of calculation in her voice. "I see Lady Catherine Eversley has already claimed his attention." Indeed, a beautiful young woman in pale green silk stood at Lord Ashton's elbow, her golden curls arranged in an elaborate style that must have required hours to achieve. She laughed at something he said, touching his arm with a familiarity that suggested prior acquaintance. "Lady Catherine is much admired," Zara observed neutrally. "She is much pursued for her dowry," the Duchess corrected. £20,000 makes even the plainest girl beautiful in the eyes of fortune hunters. "And is your son a fortune hunter, your Grace?" The Duchess's eyebrows rose at her boldness. "My son, Lady Zara, is the prize being hunted. As heir to the Westmoreland dukedom, he need not concern himself with a lady's fortune, though I assure you, he is well aware of its value." Before Zara could respond, the music ended, and the dancers began dispersing from the floor. To her horror, she saw Lord Ashton making his way toward them, Lady Catherine still at his side. "Mother," he greeted the Duchess, bending to kiss her cheek. "I had begun to think you had abandoned me to the wolves." His voice was rich and deep, with the cultured accent of an educated gentleman. "Hardly wolves, Ashton," the Duchess replied dryly. "More like eager shepherdesses seeking a particularly valuable ram." Lord Ashton winced. "Your agricultural metaphors grow more disturbing with each passing season." His gaze settled on Zara, curiosity evident in his expression. "And who is this?" "My cousin, Lady Zara Darlington," the Duchess said. "Zara, my son, Lord Ashton Ellison." Zara curtsied, keeping her eyes lowered as befitted a young lady of quality meeting a gentleman for the first time. "My lord." "Lady Zara is visiting from Northumberland," the Duchess continued. "This is her first visit to London." "Then you must find it all quite overwhelming," Lord Ashton said, his tone gentler than it had been with his mother. Zara dared to meet his gaze and found herself momentarily speechless. His eyes were a striking blue-grey, framed by dark lashes that any lady would envy. More disconcerting was the intelligence in those eyes, a keen assessment that made her feel as though he could see through her disguise with a single glance. "London is indeed a revelation, my lord," she managed to reply. "Though I confess, I find the gardens most appealing. In Northumberland, one becomes accustomed to open spaces." Something in her response seemed to please him, for a smile played at the corners of his mouth. "A lady who prefers gardens to ballrooms? How refreshingly unfashionable." Lady Catherine, who had been silently observing this exchange with increasing displeasure, chose that moment to assert her presence. "Lord Ashton promised to secure me a glass of punch," she said, her voice honeyed but her eyes sharp. "Did you not, my lord?" "Did I? How forgetful of me." Lord Ashton's smile did not reach his eyes. "Lady Catherine Eversley, may I present Lady Zara Darlington, a cousin of my mother's." Lady Catherine's assessment was swift and dismissive. "Charmed, I'm sure. Northumberland must be terribly provincial." On the contrary, Zara replied, drawing on her pride as a shield. I find it refreshingly sincere. A flicker of surprise crossed Lord Ashton's face, followed by what appeared to be genuine amusement. Well said, Lady Zara. Perhaps you would honor me with a dance? The next set is forming. The invitation was so unexpected that Zara nearly forgot her role. A lord, an heir to a dukedom, asking a lady's maid to dance? It was absurd, impossible, and yet, in that moment, she was not a maid but a lady, at least in appearance. I would be delighted, my lord, she answered, ignoring Lady Catherine's obvious outrage. As Lord Ashton led her to the dance floor, Zara caught sight of the Duchess's expression, a mixture of satisfaction and calculation that confirmed her suspicion. Whatever game the Duchess was playing, Zara had just advanced a piece on the board. The only question was whether she was a pawn or a queen. The quadrille was a dance Zara knew well in theory, having watched the Countess and her guests perform it countless times. But theory and practice were vastly different beasts, as she discovered when Lord Ashton took his place opposite her. Relax, he murmured as the music began. Follow my lead, and no one will notice if you misstep. His perception startled her. Had he already seen through her disguise? I'm perfectly comfortable, my lord, she replied, lifting her chin. Though I confess, the London style of dance differs somewhat from what I am accustomed to in Northumberland. Ah, yes. The wild dances of the north. His eye sparkled with mischief. I imagine you leaping over bonfires and dancing with shepherds beneath the full moon. Despite her nervousness, Zara found herself smiling. How perceptive of you, my lord. Though you've forgotten the sacrificial goats and ritual face painting. A surprised laugh escaped him, a genuine sound quite different from the polite chuckles he had offered Lady Catherine. Lady Zara, I begin to think my mother has been hiding her most interesting relations. The dance separated them then, as Zara was required to join hands with another gentleman in the set. When they came together again, she was more confident, allowing the music to guide her steps. Tell me, Lord Ashton said as they circled each other, what do you think of London thus far? It is exactly as I imagined, and nothing like it at all, she answered honestly. Grander, noisier, more overwhelming in its opulence. And yet, beneath the glitter, I sense a certain performance. Performance. Everyone playing a role. The débutante, the matron, the rake, the fortune hunter. All following a script as rigid as this dance. Lord Ashton studied her with new interest. That's an uncomfortably accurate assessment, Lady Zara. Most young ladies prefer to maintain the illusion that society is precisely what it appears to be. Perhaps that is why I find gardens more appealing than ballrooms. Flowers may be cultivated for show, but they cannot pretend to be what they are not. The dance brought them together for the final movements, his hand warm against hers. And what are you, Lady Zara Darlington? A hothouse orchid or a wild English rose? The question struck too close to her precarious position. Neither, my lord. Perhaps a simple daisy, unremarkable but sturdy. There is nothing unremarkable about you, he replied, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Which makes me all the more curious as to why my mother has taken such an interest in your debut. Before she could formulate a response, the music ended. Lord Ashton bowed, she curtsied, and the moment of intimacy shattered like crystal against marble. I thank you for the dance, my lord, she said formally. The pleasure was mine. He hesitated, then added, I hope we might continue our conversation later. Perhaps during the supper dance? It was a clear indication of interest, far more than Zara had anticipated or the Duchess could have planned. To accept would be to deepen the deception, to risk discovery, and yet. I look forward to it, she heard herself say, as though from a distance. Lord Ashton smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his handsome face into something almost boyish, before duty compelled him to return her to the Duchess's side. You seem to have made an impression, the Duchess observed as they watched him walk away. My son rarely requests a second dance with the same partner in one evening. I cannot imagine why, Zara replied, still flustered by the encounter. surely he has his pick of partners. That is precisely why his attention to you is noteworthy. The Duchess's shrewd gaze assessed her. You did not simper or flatter. You spoke your mind, within the bounds of propriety. It is a novelty for a man accustomed to false adoration. I am not attempting to secure his interest, Your Grace, Zara felt compelled to clarify. Whatever your purpose in bringing me here tonight, I understand my place in the world. Do you? The Duchess smiled enigmatically. How interesting. Come, we must circulate. The Countess of Fairfax has just arrived, and it would not do for her to see you too closely. Zara felt a jolt of alarm. The Countess! In her enchantment with the ball, she had almost forgotten her true position. If the Countess recognized her, the charade would end in scandal and disgrace, not just for her, but potentially for the Duchess and Lord Ashton as well. As they moved through the crowd, keeping a careful distance from the Countess, Zara could not help but wonder, what was she risking for this single night of magic? And why did the possibility of discovery feel less frightening than the prospect of the supper dance with Lord Ashton? The next 2 hours passed in a whirlwind of introductions, conversations, and carefully orchestrated movements to avoid the Countess. Zara danced with Lord Fairchild's son, a nervous young man who stepped on her toes twice, and Sir William Grant, whose wandering hands earned him a strategically placed fan to the knuckles. Throughout it all, she was acutely aware of Lord Ashton's movements around the ballroom. He danced with Lady Catherine again, and with 3 other young ladies whose names Zara had forgotten as soon as they were introduced. Yet she often caught his gaze seeking hers across the room, a silent acknowledgement that their upcoming dance remained in his thoughts. It was during a moment of respite, when she had retreated to a quiet alcove to collect herself, that disaster nearly struck. "My dear, you look positively enchanting in that gown," came a familiar voice. "Blue has always been your color." Zara turned to find the Countess of Fairfax regarding her with undisguised curiosity. Up close, there was no possibility of avoiding recognition. She braced herself for the exclamation of shock, the denouncement that would end this fantasy. Instead, the Countess merely smiled and lowered her voice. "You play your part admirably, Zara. One would never guess you were more accustomed to pressing gowns than wearing them." You knew?" Zara whispered, stunned. "Of course I knew. Who do you think suggested you to the Duchess?" The Countess's eyes twinkled with mischief. "When Helena Winters came inquiring about an educated young woman in service who might pass for quality, I recognized the Duchess's hand immediately." "But why? What purpose does this masquerade serve?" The Countess glanced around to ensure they were not overheard. "The Duchess is determined that her son should marry for love as well as advantage. A radical notion, I grant you, but she is an unusual woman. She believes that by presenting you a woman of intelligence and character but without fortune or title, she can test whether Ashton is capable of recognizing quality beneath surface trappings." "I'm a test." Zara could not keep the hurt from her voice. "An experiment in Lord Ashton's character." "More than that," the Countess insisted. "You are the alternative to a lifetime of empty, advantageous matches. The Duchess saw something in you, Zara, the same something I recognized when I hired you. You may have been born without advantages, but you possess a natural nobility that cannot be taught." Before Zara could process this revelation, a voice interrupted them. "Lady Zara, I believe this is our dance." Lord Ashton stood before them, elegant and imposing. He bowed to the Countess. "Lady Fairfax, a pleasure as always." The Countess curtsied, her eyes dancing with barely suppressed amusement. "Lord Ashton. I see you've met my young friend. Lady Zara was just telling me how much she admires your family's estate in Derbyshire." Was she indeed? Lord Ashton's gaze flickered between them, sensing undercurrents he could not decipher. "I should be delighted to tell her more about it during our dance." As he led her away, Zara's mind raced. The Countess knew. Had known all along. And the Duchess was using her as a test of her son's character, a test he was now unwittingly undertaking. The supper dance was a waltz, still considered daringly intimate in some circles despite its growing acceptance. Lord Ashton's hand rested lightly at her waist, his touch proper yet somehow thrilling. As they began to move to the music, Zara forced herself to focus on the steps rather than the warmth of his hand through the silk of her gown. "You seem preoccupied," he observed after a moment. "Has Lady Fairfax said something to distress you?" "Not at all," Zara lied. "We were merely discussing mutual acquaintances. I wasn't aware you knew the Countess well. Our connection is recent." Lord Ashton studied her face as they turned around the floor. "You are an enigma, Lady Zara. You speak like a woman of education, yet claim to be from a remote northern estate I've never heard mentioned in society. You dance with the grace of someone well practiced, yet profess to prefer gardens to ballrooms. And most curiously of all, my mother, who detests most young ladies of the ton, has taken a decided interest in you." Zara's heart pounded. He was too perceptive by half. "Perhaps I am simply more fortunate than I deserve." "I don't believe in fortune," he replied. "I believe in purpose and design. And I cannot help but wonder what design brings you into my orbit on my first night back in London." The music swelled around them, other couples becoming a blur of colour and movement. In Lord Ashton's arms, Zara felt simultaneously safe and in terrible danger, not physical, but emotional. For the first time, she allowed herself to acknowledge the truth: she was attracted to this man, not just to his position or appearance, but to the mind behind those perceptive eyes. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "designs may have unexpected outcomes. A garden planned with perfect symmetry may find wildflowers seeding themselves among the ordered beds." His grip tightened almost imperceptibly. "Are you a wildflower in my mother's garden, Lady Zara?" "Perhaps I am." She met his gaze steadily. "Would that displease you, my lord?" Something shifted in his expression, surprise giving way to admiration. "On the contrary. I have always found wildflowers more compelling than cultivated blooms. They grow where they choose, not where they are planted." The waltz drew to a close, and Lord Ashton escorted her toward the supper room, where small tables had been arranged for the guests. As they walked, he continued, "Will you tell me the truth of your circumstances, Lady Zara? Not the polite fiction my mother has constructed, but the reality." Panic fluttered in Zara's chest. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do." His voice was low, meant only for her ears. "You are not my mother's cousin. I know every branch of our family tree, distant or otherwise. You are something else entirely, someone playing a role for reasons I cannot yet discern." They had reached a relatively secluded table in the supper room. Lord Ashton held her chair, then seated himself beside her, his expression intent. "I will discover the truth eventually," he said, not unkindly. "I would prefer to hear it from you." Zara glanced around desperately, seeking the Duchess or the Countess, but neither was in sight. She was alone with a man too clever to be deceived for long. The fantasy was unraveling, thread by silken thread. "If I told you," she said finally, "everything would change. This night, this magical interlude, would end. Or perhaps it would truly begin." He reached for her hand beneath the table, his touch sending a shock through her system. "There has been something familiar about you from the moment we met. Not your face or your voice, but something in your manner, your way of speaking. As though we have met before, in another context entirely." Zara withdrew her hand, panic rising. He was too close to the truth. "My lord, Ashton. There you are." Lady Catherine's voice cut through the moment like a knife. She approached their table, her expression a mask of politeness overlaying obvious displeasure. "I've been searching everywhere. Your mother wishes to speak with you urgently." Lord Ashton's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Did she specify the nature of this urgency?" "Something about your father feeling unwell," Lady Catherine replied, her tone suggesting she cared little for the details. "She awaits you in the east drawing-room." With obvious reluctance, Lord Ashton rose. "Please excuse me, Lady Zara. I shall return as soon as possible." Of course, Zara murmured. Family must come first. As he walked away, Lady Catherine claimed his vacated seat, her smile not reaching her eyes. How fortunate you are, Lady Zara, to receive such attention on your first appearance in society. One might almost suspect derangement. The implication was clear, and it stung all the more for its proximity to the truth. I assure you, Lady Catherine, any attention I have received has been entirely unexpected. Lady Catherine delicately speared a slice of cold pheasant. It seems peculiar that no one had heard of you before tonight. The Tun is a small world, after all, and new additions are thoroughly discussed. Yet you appear from nowhere, with the Duchess's patronage, and immediately capture the interest of the most eligible bachelor in London. Zara maintained her composure with effort. I cannot speak to society's awareness of my existence, Lady Catherine. I have led a quiet life in Northumberland. So quiet that you've never been mentioned in any social correspondence, family trees, or county records I'm familiar with. Lady Catherine's smile sharpened. How extraordinary! Before Zara could formulate a response, she felt a presence at her shoulder. The Duchess of Westmoreland stood there, her expression forbidding. Lady Catherine, I believe your mother is looking for you, she said, in a tone that brooked no argument. Something about your youngest sister feeling faint. With obvious reluctance, Lady Catherine rose. We must continue our fascinating conversation another time, Lady Zara. When she had gone, the Duchess took her place. That woman has the instincts of a hunting dog and half the charm. Are you well, my dear? I am discovered, or very nearly so, Zara replied, keeping her voice low. Lord Ashton suspects I am not who I claim to be, and Lady Catherine is determined to expose me as an impostor. Ashton has always been too clever for his own good, the Duchess said with a mixture of irritation and pride. As for Lady Catherine, her suspicions are of no consequence without proof, which she will surely seek. And there is another matter, the Countess knows of this scheme. She claims to have suggested me to Mrs. Winters. The Duchess nodded, unsurprised. Jane Fairfax and I have been friends since our own debuts. She spoke highly of your character and intelligence. It was her endorsement that convinced me you were suitable for this experiment. An experiment in which I am the laboratory mouse, Zara said bitterly. A test of whether your son can recognize quality without the trappings of wealth and title. You misunderstand, the Duchess replied, her voice gentler than before. The test is not merely of Ashton's discernment, but of society's blindness. You have spent this evening conversing with the highest ranks of the Tun, and not one person, save those already aware of your true circumstances, has questioned your right to be here. Your deportment, your speech, your manners, all have been impeccable. You have demonstrated what I have long believed, that the qualities society claims to value, breeding, refinement, intelligence, have nothing to do with the accidents of birth. Zara absorbed this unexpected perspective. And Lord Ashton? What is his role in this demonstration? My son, the Duchess said with a sigh, stands at a crossroads. He can marry as expected, a woman of rank and fortune who will bring nothing to his life but social advantage, or he can recognize that happiness lies in a different direction. I merely wish to ensure he has seen both paths clearly before choosing. You wish him to choose me? A penniless vicar's daughter in service as a lady's maid. Zara could not keep the incredulity from her voice. That is not merely unlikely, Your Grace, it is impossible. Is it? The Duchess's gaze was piercing. My husband was expected to marry the daughter of a marquis. Instead, he chose me, the daughter of a baronet with a modest dowry. Society predicted disaster. 3 decades later, we have one of the most stable marriages among the peerage. She rose gracefully. The hour grows late, and this experiment has yielded more interesting results than I anticipated. It is time we departed. But Lord Ashton will no doubt have questions. Questions that must remain unanswered, at least for tonight. The Duchess extended her hand. Come, Lady Zara. Your carriage awaits. Dawn was breaking over London when Zara slipped back into Fairfax House through the servants' entrance. She had changed back into her maid's uniform before leaving Carlton House. The beautiful blue gown and jewels returned to Mrs. Winters with reluctance but without complaint. Now, as she crept up the narrow staircase to the servants' quarters, she felt like Cinderella after the ball, transformed not by magic but by silk, jewels, and the power of perception. She had almost reached her attic room when a voice stopped her. "Zara!" She turned to find the Countess of Fairfax standing in the corridor in her dressing gown, a candle in her hand casting dramatic shadows across her face. "My lady," Zara curtsied, uncertainty flooding her. "I can explain, there is no need," the Countess interrupted, opening the door to her private sitting room. "Join me. We have much to discuss, and little time before the household wakes." The Countess's sitting room was warm and intimate, far less formal than the grand reception rooms downstairs. She gestured for Zara to take a seat on a small sofa while she poured 2 cups of tea from a pot that must have been recently brought up. "The Duchess has informed me of the evening's events," she said, handing Zara a cup. "It seems you made quite an impression." Zara accepted the tea, still disoriented by the surreal quality of sitting with her employer as though they were equals. "It was extraordinary. Like a dream from which I knew I must wake. And yet, the dream may have consequences in the waking world." The Countess studied her thoughtfully. "Lord Ashton is not a man easily diverted from his purpose. If he has taken an interest in a Lady Zara Darlington, he will not simply forget her existence. Surely once he learns the truth." "What truth?" the Countess challenged. "That you are a lady's maid? That is your circumstance, Zara, not your essence. The woman who captivated him at the ball, the woman of intelligence, wit, and natural dignity, that was no disguise." Zara shook her head, unable to accept such a consoling fiction. "My lord, regardless of any personal qualities I may possess, the fact remains that a man of Lord Ashton's position cannot, will not, form an attachment to a woman in service. It would be unprecedented, scandalous, and ultimately destructive to his standing in society." "Unprecedented, perhaps. Scandalous, certainly." The Countess smiled. "But you underestimate both the Ellison family's power and their stubborn disregard for convention when it suits them. The current Duke married for love rather than advantage, as did his father before him. It is something of a family tradition." Even so, a sharp knock at the front door interrupted their conversation, the sound carrying through the quiet house. Both women froze, then the Countess rose. "Who could be calling at this hour?" she murmured, moving to the window that overlooked the street. Peering down, she gave a small gasp. "Good heavens! It appears Lord Ashton Ellison has decided not to wait for a more conventional hour to continue his pursuit." Zara's heart seemed to stop. "Lord Ashton? Here? Now? Indeed. And judging by his expression, he is not in a patient mood." The Countess turned to Zara, her eyes alight with mischief that belied her age and station. "It seems the experiment has yielded results even more dramatic than the Duchess anticipated." "I cannot see him," Zara said, panic rising. "Not like this, not as yourself." The Countess raised an eyebrow. "My dear girl, that is precisely how you must see him. The masquerade is over. Now comes the true test, not of his character, but of his heart." Before Zara could protest further, they heard Simmons, the butler, answering the door, followed by the unmistakable sound of Lord Ashton's voice in the entrance hall. "I must speak with Lady Fairfax immediately. It is a matter of the utmost urgency." The Countess straightened her dressing gown. "Wait here," she instructed Zara. "Whatever happens next must unfold without my intervention." She left the sitting room, closing the door behind her. Zara remained frozen on the sofa, the teacup trembling in her hands. Through the door, she could hear the murmur of voices, the Countess's measured tones, Lord Ashton's more insistent replies. Then footsteps approached, and the door opened. Lord Ashton stood in the doorway, still in his evening clothes, his cravat loosened and his hair slightly dishevelled. His eye swept the room and found her, and in that moment of recognition, Zara saw surprise, confusion, and then, most astonishingly, relief. "I knew it," he said softly, entering the room and closing the door. "I knew there was something familiar about you." Zara set down her teacup before she could drop it, then rose and curtsied. "My lord." He approached slowly, as one might a startled deer. "No titles, please. Not between us. Not now." His eyes searched her face. "You are the Countess's maid." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes. Zara Dawson, lady's maid to the Countess of Fairfax." "Zara Dawson, not Darlington." He shook his head, a rueful smile playing at his lips. "I should have realized sooner. You were too natural, too unaffected. Most young ladies of quality spend years perfecting the art of appearing effortlessly artificial." Despite herself, Zara smiled. An apt description, she caught herself. "Mr. Ellison." "Ashton, please." He took another step closer. "Will you tell me now? The truth of how you came to be at Carlton House tonight, disguised as my mother's cousin." So she told him everything, the mysterious summons, the Duchess's scheme, the revelation of the Countess's involvement. Throughout her explanation, he listened intently, his expression shifting from disbelief to understanding and, finally, to amusement. "My mother," he said when she had finished, "is the most devious woman in London, a fact for which I have never been more grateful." He reached for her hand, and this time, she did not pull away. "Do you know what happened after you left the ball?" Zara shook her head, acutely aware of his warm fingers enclosing hers. "Lady Catherine cornered me, triumphant with her discovery that no Lady Zara Darlington existed in any social register or family connection she could find. She expected me to be outraged, scandalized, perhaps even heartbroken at being deceived." "And were you?" Zara asked, hardly daring to breathe. "I was intrigued," he replied. "And then, when I could not find you or my mother, I became concerned. The Duchess had departed without a word, taking you with her. No one could, or would, tell me where you had gone." His grip on her hand tightened. "I spent the remainder of the night making inquiries, calling on friends, even rousing my father's secretary to search family records for any mention of a Darlington connection." "That seems excessive," Zara ventured. "It was necessary," Ashton insisted. "Because in the space of one evening, you had become the most fascinating woman of my acquaintance. And I could not bear the thought that you might disappear as suddenly as you had appeared." A self-deprecating smile crossed his face. "It was the Countess's coachman who finally took pity on me. He mentioned that the Duchess had visited Fairfax House earlier in the day, and that perhaps I might find answers here." "And now you have your answers," Zara said softly, attempting to withdraw her hand. "I am not Lady Zara Darlington. I am not a distant cousin with an independent fortune. I am a lady's maid, the daughter of a country vicar who left me nothing but books and memories." But Ashton did not release her hand. "You are Zara," he said simply. "The woman whose conversation engaged my mind, whose smile warmed my heart, whose eye saw through the performance of society with the same clarity I have always longed to find in another." "This is madness," she whispered, though hope was blooming dangerously in her chest. "You cannot possibly be suggesting—" "I am suggesting nothing," he interrupted. "I am declaring. Last night, I danced with the most desired lady in London, not because of her gown or her supposed connections, but because of her intelligence, her honesty, and her complete indifference to impressing me." He smiled. "Do you know how rare that is? To be seen not as Lord Ashton Ellison, heir to the Westmoreland dukedom, but simply as a man. But the scandal will be considerable and short-lived. Society has the attention span of a butterfly. They will find new subjects for gossip within a fortnight. Your father will support me, as he has in all important matters. He married my mother against the advice of half the peerage. He understands that happiness is too precious to sacrifice on the altar of convention." Zara shook her head, overwhelmed. "This is happening too quickly. Last night I was a lady for a few hours. Today I return to being a maid. Tomorrow, Ashton said firmly, and all the tomorrows after are yet to be written. I am not proposing marriage at this moment, Zara, though I will not pretend the thought has not crossed my mind. I am proposing something equally radical, time. Time for us to know each other as we truly are, without disguises or expectations. How? She asked practically. I cannot receive you in the servants' hall, and you cannot call upon a lady's maid in the normal way of courtship. The door opened, and the Countess reappeared, having evidently been listening from the corridor. I believe I may have a solution to that particular dilemma, she said, entering the room with a rustle of silk. Zara, how would you feel about a change in your position? My lady. I find myself in need of a companion rather than a lady's maid. Someone to read to me, correspond on my behalf, accompany me on calls, duties more suited to a gentlewoman of reduced circumstances than a servant. The position would, of course, come with appropriate quarters, a suitable wardrobe, and the social standing to receive callers of quality. Her eyes twinkled. Including certain young lords with matrimonial intentions. Zara stared at the Countess in disbelief. You would do this? For me? For you, for Lord Ashton, for the Duchess, and, I confess, for myself. The Countess smiled. I have always found conventional society tedious. The opportunity to participate in such a delicious upset of expectations is too enticing to resist. Ashton bowed to the Countess. Your ladyship, I am forever in your debt. Yes, you are, she agreed pleasantly. And I shall expect to be godmother to your first child as repayment. She turned to Zara. Well, my dear? Will you accept the position? It comes with considerable risk to your reputation, of course. Not everyone will approve of your elevation. Zara looked from the Countess to Ashton, whose eyes held a question and a promise. In the space of a single night, her life had transformed from one of quiet service to one of incredible possibility. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly unexpected. Yes, she said finally, her voice stronger than she felt. I accept. Ashton's smile was like sunrise breaking across his face. He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture that would have been scandalous in a ballroom but felt perfectly right in this moment of new beginnings. Well then, the Countess said briskly. I believe this calls for a fresh pot of tea. And perhaps, Lord Ashton, you might return at a more conventional hour to properly call upon my new companion. Say, 2 o'clock this afternoon. Ashton reluctantly released Zara's hand. 2 o'clock, he agreed. Though it will be the longest wait of my life. As he took his leave, with promises to return, Zara turned to the Countess in wonder. I don't know how to thank you. Live well, the Countess replied simply. Love deeply. And when the opportunity arises, extend the same kindness to another who needs it. She linked her arm through Zara's. Now, we have much to arrange before your suitor returns. A companion must have appropriate quarters, clothing, and most importantly, a credible history that will satisfy the curiosity of the ton. As they walked together from the sitting room, Zara glanced back once at the place where Ashton had stood. Last night, a royal ball had changed everything. Today, in the soft light of morning, she recognized the truth. It was not the ball that had transformed her life, but the courage to step beyond the boundaries others had set for her. The clock in the hall chimed 6. Only 8 hours until Ashton would return. 8 hours until the next chapter of her story would begin, not as Lady Zara Darlington, not as Zara Dawson the maid, but simply as Zara, a woman on the threshold of a future bright with possibility. And for the first time in her life, she could hardly wait for the clock to strike 2.